The days that followed my visit to Emma's house felt longer than usual. I couldn't stop thinking about her, the way she had asked me to stay that night, her quiet vulnerability, and the way we had talked like two people who'd known each other for years. Even though it was just a simple coffee and a few hours of conversation, it felt like something more. I had done jobs for plenty of people, but none of them had made me feel like I was part of something. With Emma, though, it was different. I tried to push the thought out of my head. After all, I was just a guy who fixed lights for a living. She was a woman who was trying to get her life back on track after everything had changed. But despite all the reasons, I told myself it wasn't a good idea. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something pulling me toward her. It wasn't like she had asked me to stay that night with any sort of agenda. She hadn't made any moves or tried to flirt. She was just lonely. I could tell she wanted someone to listen, someone who wouldn't judge her. And maybe, if I was being honest with myself, I wanted the same thing. A few days later, she called me again. This time, it wasn't to fix a light. "Hey," Emma said when I picked up the phone. Her voice sounded a little unsure, but there was something different about it this time, an odd sort of excitement mixed with hesitation. "I know this is probably a bit much, but could you come by again? I promise it won't be for anything big, well, I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight." I blinked at the phone, not sure if I had heard her right. "Dinner?" I asked. "Yeah," she replied quickly, her voice still soft. "I mean, I made too much food, and it would be nice to have someone around. I understand if you're busy, but—" "I'm not busy," I said before I could stop myself. "I'll be there." She let out a small laugh. "Okay, great. I'll see you soon." As soon as I hung up the phone, I felt a nervous excitement building in my chest. I hadn't expected her to invite me over again, especially not for something like dinner. But there was something about her that made it hard to say no. Something that drew me in every time I spoke to her. I arrived at Emma's house a little after 6 in the evening. The sun had just started to set, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. She opened the door with a bright smile, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and there was a calmness about her that I hadn't seen the last time. She seemed more at ease, more comfortable with the idea of me being there. "Hey," she greeted me, stepping aside to let me in. "I'm really glad you could make it." "No problem," I said with a smile. "I'm looking forward to it." She led me to the small dining room where a table was set for two. There was a steaming plate of pasta in the center, with a salad on the side and a glass of red wine next to each plate. The room was warm, the lighting soft and inviting. There was a feeling of quiet peace here, something that made the outside world seem far away. "Wow," I said, taking a seat. "This looks great." Emma smiled, though she seemed a little shy. "I hope you like it." "I'm not exactly a professional chef, but I do my best." I chuckled and dug into the pasta. It was delicious. "You're better than most restaurants I've been to," I said. "I can't cook like this." "Well, thank you," she said with a small laugh. "I've been practicing." The conversation flowed easily as we ate. We talked about everything and nothing, how I got into electrical work, her job as a graphic designer, and how she'd come to live in this town. There were still some things she didn't want to talk about, but she was more open than I had expected. It was clear she was starting to trust me, and that made me feel more at ease, too. As the meal came to a close, we both leaned back in our chairs, satisfied. Emma cleared the plates and poured us each another glass of wine. She returned to the table with a soft smile. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice a little quieter now, "about how I asked you to stay the other night. I didn't mean to make it awkward or anything." I shook my head. "It wasn't awkward at all. I actually liked it." Her eyes softened at that. "Really?" "Yeah," I said. "I think it's nice to have someone around sometimes, especially when things feel a little lonely." There was a pause, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet between us wasn't uncomfortable, though. It felt natural, like two people who understood each other in ways that words couldn't explain. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "I guess I just didn't expect someone like you to be so easy to talk to." "You make me feel, well, like I'm not completely lost." I wasn't sure what to say to that. The truth was, I wasn't sure what I was doing here either. But there was something about Emma, something I couldn't explain. She had this way of making you feel like you weren't alone in the world. "You're not lost," I said quietly. "Not anymore." She looked up at me, her eyes meeting mine. There was a moment of stillness before she looked away, her cheeks turning pink. "I don't know what I'm doing, honestly," she said softly. "I've been trying to figure things out, but it's been hard. There's so much I still need to change, so much I still need to face." I wanted to say something comforting, but I wasn't sure how to. Instead, I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a small gesture, but it felt like the right thing to do in that moment. "You don't have to face everything all at once," I said gently. "Take it one step at a time." Emma looked up at me, her expression full of gratitude. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you these last few days." I smiled at her, though inside I felt the same way. I didn't know what I was doing here either, but I was glad I was. The evening went on with more conversation, some laughter, and the kind of easy companionship that felt like it could last forever. When it was time to leave, I stood up and grabbed my jacket. Emma walked me to the door, her smile genuine and warm. "Thanks again for tonight," she said, looking up at me. "It meant a lot." "No problem," I said, feeling a little unsure about what to do next. "Maybe I'll see you again soon?" Emma nodded, her eyes lighting up at the suggestion. I'd like that. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. What had started as a simple job had turned into something more, something deeper, something that was still unfolding. But the question lingered in my mind, where would this go? And I had a feeling, just a small feeling, that I was about to find out. The small suburban neighborhood had a quiet charm to it. Lined with rows of houses, each with neatly trimmed lawns and old trees providing some shade, the area looked like it came straight from a postcard. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful, a place where nothing much seemed to change, and everyone knew everyone. It was just another Thursday evening when I arrived at the house. The sky was turning orange as the sun began to dip below the horizon. I had a simple job ahead of me, fixing the light in the garage of a woman named Emma. She had called me earlier in the week. The light in her garage had been flickering for days, and she needed someone to fix it. That's where I came in. I parked my van in front of her house, grabbed my toolbox, and walked up to the door. Before I even had the chance to knock, the door swung open, revealing Emma standing there. She smiled at me, though it looked like she was trying hard to hide something behind that smile. She was in her late 20s with soft brown hair that fell just past her shoulders. Her eyes were tired, but there was something warm about her that made you feel instantly comfortable. "Hey," she greeted me, her voice a little softer than usual. "Thanks for coming by?" "No problem," I said with a smile. "You said something about a light?" "Yeah, the garage light's been acting weird," she explained, stepping aside to let me in. I thought it was just the bulb, but I think it's something more. "I'm not really sure," I nodded, stepping into the entryway. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air, mixing with the scent of a few candles that had been lit around the house. It wasn't a large place, but it felt cozy. The walls were lined with framed photos, mostly of Emma and some friends. There was a painting of a beach scene on the wall near the stairs, and a few plants sat in the corners, as if to make the space feel even more alive. "Let's take a look," I said, motioning for her to lead the way. Emma led me through the house and toward the back, where the garage was located. The space was a bit cramped, with boxes piled against the walls and a few old bikes leaning against each other. The faint glow of a dying bulb flickered above us, making the room feel darker than it really was. "Yeah," I said, pointing at the light. "Definitely something wrong with the wiring. Probably a loose connection." I set my toolbox down and began to work, pulling out my tools. As I focused on fixing the light, I could feel Emma's gaze on me. She didn't say much, just standing there quietly. Every now and then I could hear the sound of her soft breathing, but I didn't mind. I was used to working in silence. I twisted a few wires, tightened a couple of screws, and tested the light. It flickered once, then shone brightly, illuminating the entire garage. "Done," I said with a satisfied nod, standing up and wiping my hands on my jeans. It should be good now. Emma stepped forward, her expression a little brighter. Thank you, she said, her voice softer than before. I've been meaning to get that fixed for days, but I kept putting it off. Glad I could help, I said with a smile, grabbing my tools and preparing to leave. Is there anything else you need done? She hesitated for a moment, and I noticed her glance toward the window. The sky was darkening now, and a chill had begun to settle over the neighborhood. Actually, she began, taking a small breath. Would you mind staying for a little while longer? I looked at her in surprise. Stay? Yeah, she said quickly, her cheeks flushing a little. I know it sounds weird, but it's just that I don't really like being alone at night. And you're already here, so I raised an eyebrow. You want me to stay? I mean, just stay here? She laughed softly, her nervousness clear. I don't know, it's silly. I'm just not used to having someone around. If you're busy, I understand. I thought about it for a second. Honestly, I hadn't planned on sticking around, but there was something about the way she said it, her hesitance, the quiet invitation, that made me want to stay. Plus, it wasn't like I had any pressing plans. I could stay a little while, I said, shrugging. What do you want to do? Emma's smile returned, and she seemed relieved. I don't know. I could make some coffee, or we could just hang out. Maybe talk. Talking sounds good, I said, feeling a little awkward but curious. I'll take some coffee. She led me to the small kitchen in the back of the house, where a pot of coffee was brewing on the counter. I sat down at the small table, watching as she poured us each a cup. The silence between us was different now, less tense, more comfortable. She was no longer the client, and I wasn't just the repairman. We were two people, sitting in the quiet of a house that felt warmer the longer I stayed. Do you do this often? I asked, trying to make conversation. Invite strangers to stay after they fix something? She chuckled, sitting down across from me. No, not really. I guess I just felt like I wanted someone here. It's been a tough few months. She trailed off, her fingers playing with the edge of her coffee mug. It's just been hard, you know? Moving here, trying to start over? I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to admit. Life could be overwhelming, especially when everything felt like it was changing all at once. She wasn't the only one with a past that needed healing. I get it, I said, leaning back in my chair. Starting over isn't easy. Emma looked up at me, her eyes a little softer now. Thanks for saying that, she said quietly. I didn't mean to make things awkward. I don't know. I don't like feeling alone. There it was again, the vulnerability in her voice. It wasn't something I expected, but it was there, and it made me want to listen more, to understand her more. We spent the next hour talking, mostly about small things, how she liked the town, how I ended up doing electrical work, what she missed about her old home. It was lighthearted, but there was an undercurrent to our words, a subtle pull between us that neither of us acknowledged directly. As the night wore on, I found myself wishing I didn't have to leave, but I knew it was getting late and eventually I would have to go. Well, I said, standing up and gathering my things. It's getting late. I should probably head out. Emma stood with me, walking me to the door. Thanks again, she said, her voice sincere. I really appreciate you staying. It helped more than you know, I smiled, nodding. No problem. Anytime. As I stepped outside and made my way back to my van, I found myself thinking about her, about the way she had asked me to stay and the way she had opened up, even just a little. It felt like a small moment, but somehow it meant more than I expected. As I drove away, I wondered if there was something more to this, something that neither of us had fully